I usually don't do like should you summon videos, but I feel like this is a pretty important one. There was some conversation about this in general, but also in my members only Discord chat. Speaking of which, a lot of people don't realize this, but when you become a channel member, you also have to link Discord to YouTube to actually get access to the chat. Been getting some questions about that as well. So I want to break this video up into 3 parts, sort of talking to different groups of people, purely free to play, low to mid spenders, and then, you know, on the higher end of spenders. My overall typical advice for summoning is summon who you like. I feel like for free to play though, that, you know, their primo gems are very valuable, right? They're limited, they won't have Welkin or the premium battle pass. So I feel like if you're free to play, you should be targeting the more meta characters, so you have an easier time 36 starring Abyss and being able to get those primos at least, because those are also very valuable, right? I still think getting the characters you like does trump that, but it's something to keep in mind. Nahida, even at C0, I still think is a very versatile and good character. She's one of the, if not the best applicator of Dendro. She's really good with Dendro application, which is important because a lot of the Dendro reactions are pretty strong, like Aggravate, Spread, Blooms. She can be used in a lot of these different Dendro reaction comps. And besides that, if you build her a certain way, her Tri-Karma damage, even at C0, can be really good. And while you might not be able to get her to a high constellation now, maybe next banner, if you keep saving, you can get some constellations. Like most of her constellations are really good, and I cannot say that for that many 5 stars. C1 is a pretty big buff to her Tri-Karma. C2 is actually insane. Blooms, Hyper Blooms, some other Dendro reactions can critical, which is pretty cool, but I think more importantly is this is 30% Def Shred as long as you're doing Spread, Quicken, Aggravate. So in most cases, you would have to have an Electro in your team to trigger this, but still. I think C4 is a little mid, but she does scale pretty heavily on Elements Mastery, and especially if she is the unit in your team with the highest Elements Mastery, any extra is nice because then that adds on to the other bonuses. For Nahida's full bonuses, you need 1,000 Elements Mastery, and without building her pure Elements Mastery, that is very hard. So even though this is only up to 160 extra, it could push you that little bit further, and so it's not useless, but it's, yeah, really not great. And then, yeah, C6, obviously crazy. Basically 6 quick firing Tri-Karma purifications on everyone connected to this little link thing. But that's just to say she's actually very good and usable at C0, and, you know, maybe next banner or the banner after that, you can eventually get her up to C2 and just make her a monster. Nilou will also be on the banner, of course. I would completely ignore her if you're free to play, honestly. She's amazing for a Bloom team, but at C0, that's pretty much the only thing she's good at. Using her to her full potential, you are forced to only make a team of Dendros and Hydros, so it's gonna be a Bloom team, right? And Bloom teams are really strong in a lot of scenarios, especially with these bountiful cores she'll provide. If you already have Nahida and really like Bloom teams, then it's definitely a consideration, of course. Her C2 further cements this, decreasing Hydra and Dendro res by 35%, so it would make her even better for Bloom teams, but honestly, as someone who has a C0 Nilou and a C3 Nahida, I would rather just get more Nahidas, because Nahida can be used outside of a Bloom team also. Her constellations do make her slightly more versatile by increasing the damage she can output, and then her C6 increasing her crit rate and crit damage. And I have seen some decent damage with Nilou, but I don't think she's really worth using outside of a strictly Bloom team. So that's just something to be aware of. So the in a nutshell advice would be, if you're gonna be summoning at all, get Nahida first. If you get super lucky with Nahida and have some primos left over, you could try and get Nilou. There are enough decent 4-star weapons that I wouldn't say you need their signatures or anything, though I will admit Nilou's is pretty crazy. A pretty big Elements Mastery bump, and then Elements Mastery sharing as well. It should be noted that this weapon isn't really gonna be useful on anyone else besides her, and I've tested it with some pretty good results on Kuki Shinobu as well. Outside of that, I couldn't really think of anyone that could really use this weapon great, so keep that in mind. 1,000 Floating Dreams is good for Nahida, of course. It has a lot of Elements Mastery on it, but it's not like an insanely crazy weapon or anything. Up to 3 stacks of either a small amount of Elements Mastery or a small amount of Dendro damage in her case. In Nahida's case, in my Super Bloom team, since she's the only Dendro there, it would be 30% Dendro damage bonus, which is cool. And it gives everyone else 40 Elements Mastery, but I would definitely say it's not necessary. Key of whatever though is a little bit of a different story. My Nilou, while in the team, has over 70,000 HP. Not only do we get the 20% HP increase, but also 0.12% of her HP as Elemental Mastery. So at max stacks, that's over 250 extra Elemental Mastery for her, and perhaps more importantly, an additional 0.2% of her max HP for everyone, which at 70,000 HP comes out to 140. So 250 for herself, 140 for everyone else. Elemental Mastery, of course, is very important in the Bloom team as it does increase the damage. So basically, I would say Nilou's weapon is more important for Nilou than Nahida's weapon is for her. If you're convinced you really need Nilou and really want to start doing those Super Bloom, Bountiful Core teams, I would still try and get Nahida first, and then get her, and then try and get her weapon. It is a little unfortunate they were on the same banner, as there's no extra buffer period for saving and trying to maybe get both of them. My overall recommendation, if I had very limited resources, would probably be to just straight up ignore Nilou altogether. Overall, I just think Nahida would be the more useful character. Free to play should more or less avoid weapon banner in general. So moving on to low to mid spenders, the advice will honestly mostly be the same, but if you're not strictly free to play, you know, you at least have Welkin. Maybe you're going for the premium battle pass. You buy some raw primos every now and then. Maybe on certain major update patches when they have the double offer again, you buy those. That's kind of who I'm talking to now. I am a little bit assuming you already have Nahida, but if not, then of course, try and get her. This is where it comes down to personal preference, and I can't just give you an answer. If you are very interested in super blooms and using Nilou like that, then my advice would be very different if you don't really care about that and don't feel like you need it. If it's the former and you already have Nahida, then try and get Nilou. Just C0 I think is perfectly enough. You don't necessarily need her weapon either. It is at the end of the day just stats, just Elemental Mastery, but a pretty good amount of Elemental Mastery for herself and the entire party. Arguably in this one team, it is far more important than Nahida's own weapon, even though I don't feel like 1,000 Floating Dreams is as good as the key here. I still think it's an overall more worthy investment. So I'd only try and get the key over 1,000 Floating Dreams if you are going to main a Bloom team, basically. If you're not sure or know you're not going to be, you know, primarily doing Blooms, again, I would probably ignore Nilou and just trying to make your Nahida better. There's the third option, which I haven't really touched on, and that is summoning neither and waiting for Baiju and Kaveh, the new characters. From what little I gathered from the special program, I don't think either of them are going to be as good at Dendro application as Nahida, though outside of possibly incorrect leaks, that's pretty much all the information I have about them, so I'm not really touching on them at this moment. I guess there is something worth noting. I would not trade Nilou for one Nahida constellation. I don't use Super Bloom that often, but it is a pretty fun and powerful team. So though I'm in a position where I already have a very strong Nahida, I would first go for C5 Nahida rather than C2 Nilou. I value Nahida's versatility more, so even if C5 would do less in the Super Bloom team than Nilou C2, I would still prefer to get C5 because first of all, it's closer to C6, and second of all, she's not limited to that one team. As for the big spenders, you do have a lot more flexibility, I'm assuming. I would definitely try and get Nilou and her signature weapon, as well as 1,000 Floating Dreams. It is a pretty nice weapon banner if you do want to go Super Bloom because I mean, they are both there. Even if you don't get the one you choose for Epitomized Path, you're guaranteed by the second one to either get Key or Floating Dreams. I would, of course, as usual, just put more emphasis on Nahida. I would say I do kind of fall into this category, but I'm also a collector and kind of just want every character. So it takes me a very long time to get everyone to C6, even though I feel like I do drop a decent amount of money on this game. Nahida, I feel like, is one of the 5 stars that is C6 worthy. Unlike Shogun, which is my first C6 exclusive hero, her C6 is kind of not good, honestly. I would still like prioritize C6 Nahida over C2 Nilou, to be honest. I haven't decided yet if I'll personally be summoning for Nahida when she comes back, because she's already C3, she's already insane. C6 would of course be crazy insane level, but I don't feel like I need it. I can typically get through Abyss perfectly fine. So until Genshin has some other or different in-game content, I don't really feel like it's necessary. And I have a feeling if they're ever going to do that, it's still pretty far off. I pretty much never get weapon refinement ranks on purpose. If anything, I just prefer constellations because it's the character itself and not their equipment. So yeah, I really don't think there's too much else to say. As a quick summary, Nahida good. If you don't have her, summon if you can. Try and get her. She's a really nice character, even at C0. Only get Nilou if you're absolutely sure you want to do Super Bloom teams. It's a fun, strong team, but it's only one team. At least in my Super Bloom team, Nahida is always a part of it, so I would still prioritize her, even if that's the case. You can also wait and see for Baiju and Kaveh, but since they're coming after this banner, It's going to be a little too late, unless of course you want to rely on unofficial information. But yeah, feel free to leave your own thoughts or suggestions in the comments down below. Leaving a like if you enjoy is always greatly appreciated. As far as subscribing is concerned, in this YouTube day and age, it literally does nothing unless you also ring the bell. So that would be greatly appreciated. Thanks, as always, for watching. And until next time. You know that funny thing I say when I pick up materials, the beep? Well, I turned that into merch. Yeah, here we have the beep hat. You can feel the beep. We also got a beep cup and a beep shirt. It's a nice sizable beep. Make sure to go to mogamerch.com. Check it out. 100% guaranteed to increase the amount of beeps in your life.